I'm a big believer in you always hire people that are better than you and that are going to be better than you. And hopefully you're giving them a springboard to go find those opportunities, but also listening to the voice in your head and allowing yourself to not let insecurities get in the way of that. And if anybody says they're really good at it, I'd love to take a lesson because I think it's just it's an evolving problem.
Hey, Nicole, so good to see you. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Give us the whole spiel. How did you get into tech? Give us the journey to CRO.
Yeah, sure. I'll give you like the very abridged version. So I started my career in the wine industry, I think, which was not obviously tech related. And I think coming out of college, like I honestly just needed a job. And I say to people all the time, I'm like, I don't know if a lot of people choose to go into sales. I think oftentimes like sales happens to you and it's like the job you can get. And anyway, it was in the wine industry. And I thought it was at the time really cool at 22 years old to be in the wine industry. And then the more and more I learned about it, the more I was like, this is really slow and it's not super dynamic. It's very traditional. What am I doing? And so I made the transition over to tech, but I had always been in outside sales. And so when I moved into tech, I moved into inside sales, which was like a completely different learning experience for me. Cause I was used to reading body language and reading the room and trying to get physical triggers from people. And so then when I moved into inside sales, it was this experiment in listening that probably actually was realistically the best foundational moment for my career in general. And I worked at a company called LoopNet, which is now owned by a company called CoStar. It was a commercial real estate marketplace. And I felt like I learned a ton about how fast and how quickly things change in tech, which was a great breeding ground. And then went over to Eventbrite. And at the time, Eventbrite was still fairly small, but had really started to disrupt a very traditional industry with ticketing, but in a completely different space than where a lot of the large players existed. And it was the first time I think I really had to tell a story and not have a brand to rely on and not have a brand name to rely on, which created a really, I think, interesting moment for me to figure out, like, how do you actually create the right process with the right engagement from a prospect and internally, and how do you actually communicate internally with teams to be able to say, this is what we're hearing, this is what needs to change in the product, et cetera. And I was really fortunate that I got to try a lot of different things at Eventbrite in multiple stages of my journey there. I was there for 10 years and started as a rep and left as the GM of North America. And I was in a variety of global roles. And then I decided to do something different. And I went to Deputy, and you've had Ashik on this podcast. And I think one of the things that's always translated for me in every role I've taken is like the human element of technology. So I think making sure that you're utilizing technology to either solve a human problem or find a reason that just makes life a little bit easier for people. And I think that's what technology is really cool. But I actually think it's really difficult to find companies that truly empower either the user or the audience that they're serving. And that was the thing that really captivated me about Deputy. I knew nothing. It's a workforce management company. I knew nothing about workforce management, but I loved the story around being able to empower a really underserved population of people. And I'm now at a company called Medely, which is like this perfect combination of a marketplace and SaaS. And again, it's solving human problems. It's a marketplace for nurses. And I think one of the things that really drew me to that is almost any interaction you have in healthcare, there's usually a nurse involved, right? And they can actually make or break your experience a lot of times. You don't often have a ton of interaction with a doctor. And I think coming out of a pandemic and seeing what the healthcare industry and specifically what nurses had to endure and are still continuing to endure, and just the shortage in the population there, I was so attracted to the problem that Medely was solving for both the facility and the nurses. That's where we are today.
So very cool. Congratulations on your career today. I know Graham, who's a business partner, of course, and Ashik's a good mate. They both
Yep.
speak very highly of you, Nicole. So it's great to have you here.
They lied. No, I'm kidding.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're both
Perhaps they were
lovely.
drinking too much wine. No, but hey, you've been at some great companies as you just highlighted. And you've been there for a long period of time. Like the change that you would have seen at Eventbrite, even at Deputy, would have been huge. And there were global roles. Now that you go back in time or you reminisce, what was the biggest single takeaway from each one of those roles?
It's a really tough question. The biggest single takeaway from my role as a rep, I don't know if I could necessarily pinpoint like every role at every company, but like a role as a rep, it would be how to actively listen. And I think that transition from outside sales to inside sales really taught me how important that was. And that translates into every single aspect of business. If you're not hearing the conversation, you essentially are handicapped in every way, whether that's because you're selling, whether that's because you're trying to absorb information, or if it's because you need to go talk to a board and you need to be able to communicate effectively what's happening. So as a rep, it was certainly actively listening. I would say in my early management career, it was learning how to be empathetic and not sympathetic. And I think that when you're in early management, there's a very big distinction that's really difficult and a very gray line between the two. But especially in revenue roles, empathizing with both the rep, the business, the prospect is incredibly important. But sympathizing with them doesn't actually allow you to progress forward. And so I think that was probably the biggest learning in my early management career. And then as I got into more senior management roles, it was really about more along the lines of effectively working, not in silos. And I think I always say sales is this really interesting intersection of a lot of moving pieces. And oftentimes sales is the team that is often talked about. They're highly measurable. So you can see what's happening in the sales team really easily, but it is hyper dependent on the rest of the business to actually be super successful. And so I think, again, as I progressed in my career, that was probably the bigger learning was like, how do I actually take all of those things that I learned as I was building my career, effectively communicate, learn, and be able to wrap your arms around the entirety of a business so that you're going at a problem together versus alone.
Yeah. I like the point about sympathy and empathy that you highlighted. And as then you progress, Nicole, as you've gone from outside sales to inside sales, management, senior leadership, and being around exec and then serving to the board. How's your leadership style evolved and where do you find yourself now? I know everyone's evolving literally as we speak, right? Like maybe who Nicole was 2 years ago is not Nicole today, but where do you see yourself today on that spectrum?
Yeah, I would say I'm like a lot less concerned about making mistakes today. And I think that is not something that I was even aware that I was afraid of probably 2 years, 5 years ago. And I think there's two components to that. So I'll get to the leadership style in a second because I think it impacts my leadership style. But I think being aware that one, you're going to make mistakes, two, figuring out if you did, what do you learn from them? But then three, understanding that is actually the most human component of being a leader, right? Is like actually being able to come back and say, ooh, I didn't look at this one particular thing, or this isn't a well-rounded decision and I made a mistake here, etc. I do think though that I'm able to acknowledge that a lot more readily today. I think where it impacts my leadership style, and I would say this is probably both how I'm described and how I would describe myself, is I am extremely direct. And I don't think that it's without context. And I think that is actually one of the things that sometimes being direct is not always viewed as a trait that's desirable. But I think when you're direct and you can give people context and you understand the why behind either the questions that you're asking or the decisions that you're making, everyone gets brought along on the journey. And I'm actually better for it as well, right? I start to learn quite a bit more. And I find that my openness to new ideas and suggestions, et cetera, has drastically changed probably realistically over the last 5 years. But I'm also demanding that a lot more from the people who work for me. And I think that's where the rubber hits the road. Is I can present in a certain way or want all of these things, but I also expect that's the team mentality as well. And I think making those expectations clear is part of how you build a team and culture, et cetera.
I think that's what one great leader can do, right? I'm with you. I don't think niceness equals effectiveness. In many cases, I think it's always be like, that person's nice because they're dragging along. But to your point, sometimes you just got to be direct. Like the role that you're in now, CRO, I want to come back to that. It's evolved hugely. I remember like when I first got into that role 5 years ago, I think it was still this new title that was being bounced around, but in some ways it was still attached heavily to new customer acquisition. As the business has evolved and the capital scenes have changed, the role has also evolved and it's become bigger. So Nicole, tell us a little bit about what does a typical day or perhaps a week or a month in your current role look like, and what are your priorities and focus areas?
Yeah. Right now, it's still like very much learning mode. I've been at my new role for 4 months, and I said to several people actually last week, I crossed this 90-day mark and went, oh God, because you have this like ramp into a role and you're trying to consume a bunch of information. You're learning people, you're learning systems, you're learning process, you're learning what's been done and trying to decide whether you care if it's been done or whether you need to throw it out and actually just reimagine the future. Yeah. And then you hit this 90-day mark and you're like, I don't feel like I know anything. The question around what am I doing on a daily basis, or what is a daily base? What does it look like for me on a daily basis? I'm trying to actually find patterns, I guess is what I would say is the best way to characterize my daily mode of operation. So right now I'm getting back to waking up in the morning and getting on my computer and immediately like checking every report that I have access to see what's changed or what am I missing, et cetera. And what I'm finding right now is I'm missing a lot of pieces still. And so then actually going and hunting down who I need to actually find the puzzle pieces to start putting stuff together. I also am finding that, and this is probably more on a weekly basis, I stack a lot of my one-on-ones towards the early portion of the week because I find that people have a lot more energy, are a lot more candid with me. They've had a bit of a break over the weekend. And so there's this sort of a moment of human interaction where you could just be like, how was your weekend? And then talk me through everything that happened last week so that you get more of a level set of what was, and then enough time to potentially make moves to change things and change patterns in the week that comes. And then as I progress through the week, I have more, I would say, operational meetings during the middle of the week. And then as I round out towards the end of the week, what I'm trying to save more space for is building the future. And I think that's something that I haven't done well in my career. Often you get really inundated with all of the things that need to get done and the day-to-day motions. And I think CRO roles can be challenging to say and challenging to have because it is this weird intersection of strategy and operations. And you're constantly bouncing back and forth. And it's not a fully strategic role. And it can't be a fully operational role. And so I'm trying to actually save space towards the end of a week where I can actually put my thoughts to paper and brain dump a little bit about what's happened. What do I still not know? That's like probably the biggest area for me right now is like, what are the outstanding questions? And that's not necessarily always about the business. Sometimes that's market dynamics. Sometimes it's like, I haven't talked to a customer in 3 weeks. Like I need to get back in front of somebody. And a lot of what do I need the narrative to be in the future for the team, for the market, for the board or whatever. So I'm trying to reserve more space at the end of a week for that.
That's really interesting what you said. I've started something new too. And I think looking at patterns is a great way to look at it. But another thing, and I don't know if you felt this, but do you have the time to take a step back and say, this is where I was, and you've talked about a great career, and this is who I want to be in this CRO role? I can't say it either. And do you feel that there is a gap there that you are also personally trying to develop and fill? And how does that work into, as you put these patterns together, as you're putting your team together and you're really looking at how you balance between strategic and operational? I think also do you have that time to think about this is where I want to be? This is who I want to be as a CRO?
Yeah, probably more right now than I've given the opportunity to think about. I think sometimes as you progress further in your career, and maybe this comes with age, maybe it comes with experience, I don't know. For me, it comes with actually taking a step back in order to take a step forward, and taking a breath and trying to figure out, like, yeah, who do you want to be when you grow up? And honestly, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is to that, because Ricky, to the point that you made earlier, everything changes and evolves. And we've just come out of this really bizarre dynamic in tech, and the world is still in this really strange place. But I think the biggest gap for me around where I am today and where I want to be is I would love to just be able to be a bit more intuitive. I would love to get to a place where I can sense something and feel really confident that I'm sensing the right thing versus second guessing it all of the time. And most businesses are not so different from each other that you can't have that gut feel, right? But I think it's not always easy to be like, no, this is wrong or this is right. I very much I question a lot of it. And so I would love to get to a place where I let instincts control me a bit more than I have in the past. But then you also brought up a really interesting point around team and the people around you. And I think one of the things that you start to learn as a leader is hiring to your weaknesses. And so one of the big things that I've been a lot more cognizant of is like where I'm not as strong, I need to go find somebody who's better than me there, right? And be really confident and okay with the fact that I just found this really amazing person who's going to, and then I have this ability to learn from them as well. And I'm a big believer in you always hire people that are better than you and that are going to be better than you. And hopefully you're giving them a springboard to go find those opportunities. But also listening to the voice in your head and allowing yourself to not let insecurities get in the way of that. And if anybody says they're really good at it, I'd love to take a lesson, because I think it's just it's an evolving problem.
I haven't found anybody yet.
Yeah,
absolutely. But I do love your answer, because I think there needs to be more of that. And I feel the same way. And I guess the other thing is, do you have mentors, male and female, that you can bounce some of this off of? Because I know that, including Ricky, like I talk to a bunch of guys who have a very different view, and then other female executives who also have a very different view. And I feel like what the answer that you gave in terms of trusting your instincts is something that, like, we as women have probably more so than guys. No offense, Ricky, but the guys use it really well.
Taken.
Yeah, good. And it's something I feel like, especially in tech and the way that buyers are buying now, like, it's an asset. But sometimes I need to be talking to other female executives, but also male executives who mentor me to help me make that muscle stronger.
Yeah, in a full transparency, I have this interesting battle within my own head around like where I need to find support. And I would say sometimes there's a male-female dynamic. Sometimes it's just that I think of somebody who's really amazing at engineering and as somebody who I can learn from, because it's just if this, then that, right? There's logic to a lot of the way that they think about getting results. In particular, around the female dynamic, I think there was this also really interesting big shift into, especially with tech, around how you empower females. And I think the point that you're making around, and it's beyond mentorship. It's really around community, because I don't even know, like, some of my mentors are not executives, right? Like, some of my mentors are like not in an executive role. And I feel like I actually learn the most from them. And sometimes it's because they're telling me about their experiences. And I'm like, oh my God, I think I just did that. I didn't realize what the impact would be on somebody. But there was this moment in tech where it was really hard for a while to be female. And I actually think we've crossed quite a bit of a bridge, and there's a much more interesting dynamic. And I'll be honest, it's one of the reasons that I thought Deputy was so interesting. I thought that being out of Silicon Valley and the culture in Silicon Valley and working for an Australian-based company, which has a very different culture than the US, right? And working for a tech founder, like all of those things created a cool dynamic that was different. And so it wasn't even about male, female at that point. It was just about, I'm surrounded by a lot of the same and a lot of homogenous thinking. And how do I potentially break away from some of that and get a bit more perspective? And even when you're working in global roles, you try to meet the kind of communication that's acceptable for that culture, but you have to be taught it too. And actually, depending on where you're working, the male and female dynamic might be different. And yes, I have mentors. Yes, I have a lot of female mentors that I think really highly of, but I have an equal amount of males that I really heavily rely on, honestly, to check me more than anything. You know?
Great.
I mean, honestly, some of the male mentors, I think we're lucky when we can say we have some great guys around us who are supportive. And yeah.
Agreed.
Nicole, you're one of the only few Americans that I know. Obviously, Simpro was similar, where we were Australian, Kiwi-based business that went global and had a lot of American execs then working with us. You were in this unique position as you just highlighted. You're in Bay Area. You were working for an Australian tech. What was some of the best things that you found? What did you find about the culture differences? Because that often comes up, right? Because for most ANZ companies, we have to go overseas. Like we have no choice. So at some point, we're mentally ready. We'll probably learn much more about US than we have to, even from early on. But I don't think it's quite the same for Americans having to learn about Aussie Kiwi cultures. So what were some of the culture barriers that you have to come over?
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like they're actually so nuanced, and it took me a minute to figure them out. And when I went to Deputy, it wasn't the first time I'd worked with an Australian team before. It was just the first time that like the vast majority of the team was Australian versus American. I think that and especially in Australian tech, there's still this we can do it, but it doesn't have to be so serious vibe, right? And I think some of that's cultural, but some of it is also like a little bit of what Silicon Valley was at some point, right? Where it's, let's just try it. Let's figure this out. Let's try it. The one thing that's probably was hard for me personally was, and I'll go back to what I said about my leadership style, is I am incredibly direct. And I actually think Australians are also incredibly direct, but don't always like to have the feedback given directly to them. And so it's this very bizarre dynamic because I would be incredibly direct because they gave me very direct feedback. And I'd be like, wait, you didn't really just love that. And so it was this interesting dynamic and balance. I also think, and I don't know, you could tell me if I'm wrong here, but they really pride themselves on relationships and building trust. And in sales and in an SMB sale, sometimes that's hard, right? Because you're like more process oriented than you are thinking about how you also build trust and dynamic in a very short sale. And so I actually learned a lot from the way that the Australian teams entered into calls and the tone of voice that they used and why it was so important that when somebody was buying, that they felt like they had a trustworthy person on the other end of the phone or across from them, et cetera, which you don't find in the US anymore. I should say, I don't find that dynamic to be as prevalent in the US anymore.
I think you're right. And I can play the whole Kiwi cat, right? So we're even more insular. Because I think, Nicole, it just comes down to the fact there's 1 degree of separation. The chances of that buyer knowing someone I know is high, right? So I basically don't want to mess it up. I think that's where it actually boils down to, and I think that's where it comes from. But you're right. I think every call, literally every meeting starts off with some sort of a trust building exercise, which is ingrained to you from early days. And I think that carries on. Whereas you're right. I think in the US, it's very much about business. And that's cool too. I love that about the whole US culture. So going back to, I think, putting the focus back on you, what were some of the things you think you're going to take from your global roles
Yeah.
that you've had and then apply it to now? Because you're in this unique place now where you've gone from having very diverse global roles to a US role.
Yeah, I think the biggest learning that I got from global roles, and to be fair, it was a very distinct decision that I made based on where I'm at just at a stage in life where I needed to not work in as many time zones because of my kids' ages, to be fully transparent. And I needed to be in the US actually, like physically a little bit more than I was. But the biggest learnings I would have, and this is having worked across a handful of different regions, is you don't know what you don't know. And I think that's probably one of the hardest lessons culturally to learn is like the risk that you take if you make an assumption that everything is the same, regardless of where you are or who you're talking to. Potentially incredibly detrimental to your own reputation, your own brand reputation, as well as building business and building any level of credibility for the future. And in full transparency, I think I had to learn that the hard way, especially when you don't think that there's as many cultural nuances, I think, or that you're not aware or they're more subtle, etc. It's a lot easier when you know that there's massive cultural differences. It's really difficult when those differences are a lot more subtle. And I would say it really has changed a lot of my perspective about trying to just ask a lot more questions and hear the answers, and then and this is actually where the sales training has helped me a ton, but hear the tone that things are delivered in and the way that they react to the kinds of questions that you ask, so that you can get a read on, am I offending you? Or did we just make progress, right? That applies to every aspect of business. If I'm meeting with a rep for the first time, the chance of my title being more intimidating to them than I am potentially is hard. I don't want them to be. And so listening to the way that they respond to my questions are a really important component. Talking to a board member who, trying to understand what they care the most about in a business and then reacting to that versus me just like telling them all of the things, because that's not really helpful either. I would say those are the biggest things for me that came from working in global businesses for years. Is just don't make assumptions and don't assume you know anything. Let them teach you and you'll be much better for it.
Good lessons for everyone listening out there. Just going back to your CRO role and the current place you find yourself in, Nicole, I think it would be great for listeners to dig into a little bit deeper because you've taken on a big role. You're going through the first 90, 100 days exercise. You said you're doing a lot of one-on-ones, customer engagements, cross-functional, board, all sorts of stuff is coming your way. And you also talked about relying on your instinct or trusting your instinct. So how are you allowing yourself to give you that space? You mentioned you're loading everything up in front of the Monday, Tuesday. Is there a Friday that you go for a long walk? What is it that you're intentionally doing to make sure that those big ideas come to you?
Yeah, I should probably go for long walks, to be honest. So maybe I will from now on. No, I think the biggest thing is for me right now anyway, is not taking everything that I'm hearing as truth. And I think one of the challenges in a CRO role is everybody's going to tell you about what's happened in the business. Many of the times, the reason you're hired is to change the future of the business, especially at a growth stage business. And so if you only rely on the information that you have around what was versus what could be, I think you're in a really challenging place. And so a lot of the time that I'm spending is, okay, does that exist for a reason? Or is it because that's just been the assumption for a really long time and we actually need to break it apart? And then if we break it apart, what is it that we're missing? What do we actually need to know? The other thing that often happens in a business is when you think about the competitive dynamic, you can list off a bunch of competitors, you can create all these battle cards, you can do all of the same things. But what people forget, and I think this is part of what a CRO has to do, is look beyond what the set is doing today, understand where the opportunity is for tomorrow, understand what the market dynamics look like, what the financial health of the businesses that you're looking at or that you're competing with actually look like, and try and determine, is there a there that we just haven't even confronted yet? And do we have space to be the first or one of the first there? And so in order to do that, I literally will just open up a Google Doc and start. It's like stream of conscious, like just start almost like journaling, I guess is the best way to say it. And then what I find from that is that I have a lot more unanswered questions than I do facts. And then I just go try and hunt those down. I'm in a really fortunate position at Medely where there is such a healthy mix of executives who have really amazing tenured experience and some new executives. And so it creates a really powerful team dynamic around trying to understand, what do we need to preserve? What can we throw out the door, honestly, and do something more interesting or more dynamic? But yeah, for me, the space is created in trying to just get things on paper. It's the same with taking notes. I'm probably one of the few people that I still write everything down, mostly because I remember it that way, not because I really love paper, but because it's the only way I can actually commit it to memory.
Yeah. Nothing beats good old pen and paper. Just getting a bit deeper on that and trying to be a little more tactical on this question, Nicole. So I just recently did a post too, whenever you're in an exec, especially you're taking on a new role, a lot of people, when they catch up with you, they want to talk about predecessor, what they didn't do, how did they do this, how did they not do this? Do you have a bit of a framework to go, hey, I'm going to catch up with you, but these are the things I'd like to cover off?
Yeah.
I don't really want to, to your point, I don't really want to look in the past too much. So what are some of the key questions or responses you're looking for from them?
Yeah. And there's two things that I would say just from a clarity perspective. I've said this quite persistently in my current role. I don't want to talk about the people component of it because I think it's unfair and I don't know the people and I don't need biased opinions either. And so I think also making sure that distinction is very clear, that why the person made the decisions that they did, I don't know, you don't know, we weren't there for that. And so that's actually the very first context that I said, because I don't also want to get into a situation where I'm absorbing information that's, like I said, biased or inaccurate or emotionally written. But most of the questions I ask are really simple. What's going well? If you could change anything, what would it be? What do you think the biggest challenge is and why? And what have you done to change it? And the last question is the one that no one answers well, in full transparency, because one, it's like they're not expecting me to say, what do you mean what I can do? And oftentimes, and it depends on, I'd ask the same questions regardless of level. So whether you're an IC, a more junior manager, a more senior manager. And what I found is that the people who really want to be there and really want to learn come back to me after the meeting and they're like, I don't think I answered that question. This has happened to me over and over again. I don't think I answered that question well, but I also don't think I've done much. But here are the 5 things that I would like to do moving forward. And all of a sudden you have a bit of a framework of how you guys are going to work together moving forward. It's almost never failed me. And it also helps you evaluate your talent pool, which is a really important part of starting a new job.
Yeah. I love that. It's simple, but it's to the point, right? I think everything that I've come to know about you, Nicole, it seems like a very simple, direct approach, but it's effective. So why change it? So tell us about now you've done the grunty work of first quarter. What about the next quarter and the year ahead? What are you excited about? What are you looking forward to? You've got your feet under the rug a bit. So tell us about that.
I would say there's 2 things. This first sort of half is going to really be built around foundational work. So what do we actually have to rip and replace? What do we need to rebuild? And all utilizing data as the source of truth and trying to understand where it is that we want to go based on where we are today. That I would say is my next 6 months, right? And then making sure you have the right people, process, systems in place to be able to do that. The next 6 months for me is starting to think about, okay, now if I can get these foundational motions in place, assuming I have the right team and process, et cetera, then how do I think about not the next 6 months, but the next 2 years? And what do we actually need to do? And what does the market need to be ready for? And how do we actually bring that vision? And it's not necessarily my vision, right? It's like the company's vision. How do we bring that to life? And how do we start articulating the right story? And that's done through multiple teams. How do we work with brand and PR and marketing and sales and customer success and really all have the same vernacular. And honestly, that's the work that I'm like the most excited about, but I don't have the foundational motions to give me the insight around the direction for the next piece quite yet. Pieces of it, but that's what the next 6 months will do.
That makes sense. As you say it, there's a big smile on your face. So I can tell
I'm
how
so excited.
Yeah, that's awesome. And we'd love to obviously connect and maybe have you again in a year's time. How's that journey gone and what from there on? Gauri, I am out of questions unless you have more. We can probably move to Quickfire.
This has been fabulous. It's great to hear your story and also just your thought processes as you come into this role. There's a lot of learnings that I picked up from this conversation. So it's fantastic. So Ricky, I think fire it is.
Yeah. So you're taking notes, Gauri, and you guys can probably exchange notes on the first 100 days later on. Nicole, we do this for every guest that pops on the show. These are simple, one-word answers, so no multi-choice. You can't go, hey, if this or that.
I feel like this is the part that makes me the most nervous.
Just be you. Be direct.
I know. That might be the reason why I'm most nervous.
Don't worry. We have the ability to edit. So anyway, you can't go wrong. Favorite sports team?
You're great.
Nice.
I don't have one. I don't have one.
Oh, that's okay. No worries. We can go without it. Favorite music genre? What do you listen to? What's on your Spotify playlist?
Oh, pop. Like through and through. Billboard Top 100, like pop.
Nice.
Everything about the culture of pop. Yeah.
Die-hard pop fan. Awesome. Favorite movie of all time? They might have changed with the kids coming along, but your favorite movie of all time?
No. Clueless. It's the jokes just don't get old, and it's like vintage Paul Rudd. It's just so good.
Yeah. I've seen watching that, especially during Christmas. This is an interesting one. Favorite place to visit for you?
Yeah, I probably right now Mexico, because it's not too far from California, and I should say beach cities in Mexico because my kids are entertained, I'm entertained, like everyone wins.
Win situation. And this is the last one, Nicole. This is a bit of a funky one. If you were given a choice and you had peanut butter crunchy in your right hand and peanut butter smooth in the left, what are you going for?
Smooth all day long. Smooth.
Oh, like shaking your head.
I'm not trying to work harder than I have to.
Oh,
fair enough.
Smooth.
We gotta respect your choice on that. Nicole, thanks once again for coming on the show and sharing your insights. I wish you all the very best for what's to come this year for you and Medely. And it's been great.
Yeah, thanks for having me.